Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Property Subcommittee on Wednesday, the 6th of October. It's 12 o'clock. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Good afternoon, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Jonathan Price.
Second item is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? For the record, none being indicated. Third item on the agenda is minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of September 2021. Can I take those as a correct record of the meeting? Proposed by Councillor White. Okay. Everybody happy? Yeah. So moving forward then to agenda item number 4, which is proposed leases to academies. Councillor DeVille, we're with you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The sites are St Michael's C of E in Lichfield and St Chad's C of E also in Lichfield, Chairman. It's a straightforward transaction, Chairman. The sites are currently owned by Stafford County Council and are used currently by the two schools. It is, of course, the expectation of the Department of Education that a lease will be granted to allow schools to run as academies. So it's a transaction that we've dealt with on many occasions at this committee, Chairman. Just bring Stuart in. The conversion date for these two schools is January the 1st, 2022. Bring you in, Stuart, if you have anything to add, please.
Yeah, relatively straightforward transaction. St Chad's is about as simple as it can be. St Michael's got detached playing fields, which gets jointly used by another school, and we're ensuring that sort of sets precedent that both schools sort it out locally. But should be no issues at all.
Thank you very much. Do we have any local member input?
No comments have been received.
Before I open it up to members of the committee, comments from legal?
No.
Finance?
No comments, Chair.
Valuation?
No further comment from me, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Turner, is there anything the members need to be aware of before they make a determination?
No, as Councillor DeVille said, we've done a lot of these. It's fairly standard practice, so there's essentially no implications for us. Thank you.
Members of the committee, you've heard the professional input. Is there anything you'd like to add before making a recommendation? Back to you, Councillor DeVille, for the recommendation, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the recommendation is that the lease of the sites set out in the schedule in the standard format be approved.
All those in favour? For the record, that's unanimous. It is approved. Moving on then to agenda item number 5, Stonall Youth and Community Centre, Stonall Community Centre, the Hut proposed early surrender of lease. We have the local member with us, Councillor Smith. Councillor Smith, if you could join us. Thank you very much. I'm back on again. There we go. Councillor DeVille, let me just check. Is it you taking us through this? Yep, over to you.
Councillor Smith. Chairman, the Parish Council currently leases the community building and the car park attached. The buildings are very old and probably are at end of life. Bottom line objective really here, Chairman, is to work with partners to provide an ongoing sustainable community facility. Ian Turner, I know, has done considerable amount of work on this proposal, Chairman. If I can bring Ian in now to sort of add his comments and then move this item forward, Ian, please.
Thank you. As Councillor DeVille says, there has been quite a lot of work done on this. So it was leased out to the Parish Council for 30 years with an obligation to demolish the old buildings at the end of the lease, because we're aware when we entered into that lease that the buildings were going to be an ongoing problem. The local member brought an item to the property committee a couple of years ago to have the building transferred, so rather than a lease, transferred to the parish council to allow investment and potentially replacement of that building with something longer term. The parish council have reviewed that situation and don't want to do that, but the current management committee do. So this is the first step in the process to transfer it to the management committee so that they can maintain the building in the short term and then look for investment to replace it in the long term, as Councillor DeVille says, therefore securing it as a long-term community asset. So the first step is the early surrender of the lease, and then what is proposed here is a temporary licence to a member of the management committee, while the management committee forms itself into a corporate body able to take either a long lease or the freehold of the site and then put it over totally into community control. So the thing we are proposing is to take, so rather than have the site returned to us with the buildings demolished, is to take from the parish council the cost of the demolition, and we will hold that in lieu, and then the intention is that when the management committee is formed into a corporate body and is able to take long-term control, we could pass that money to the management committee for them to use either for a medium-term support of using the building or actually to put it towards a replacement facility. So that's the overview. As I say, a first step in a process of transferring it to a community organisation that will invest in it and look after it for the long term. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, if you could just set out your proposals before I go to the professional officers for their input as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, could I say a very sincere thank you to Ian Turner, who has been a tremendous help in pulling together what we have before us today. It's been a fairly difficult couple of years, but I'm absolutely delighted to say that what we are really asking the committee to agree today is to accept the termination of the lease with the cost of the demolition and legal costs and various bits and pieces. That would then put us into a situation where the management committee, who have already done a tremendous amount of work, and we've worked with the management committee on how we're going to take this forward. Obviously, we're not in a position to make a proposal to this committee because you haven't yet accepted the surrender of the lease. But assuming that the committee today accept the surrender of the lease, then we will move very, very quickly with the management committee to take over the formation of an appropriate trustee board and charitable status, and it will start to aggressively raise funds to be able to replace the building. So, Chairman, what I'm asking the committee today is simply to facilitate the process where you take the building back again. I accept in the report that there is a very, very minor risk that the management committee don't take it on. I think that is so minor that I don't think it's something we should feel concerned about. I've also looked at the suggested alternatives or the different options for the site. I don't think that there is anything which is any better than is being proposed as the recommendation to the committee today, Chairman. So that's really the case, unless I can be of any help to anyone.
You may well be in a moment. I'm just going to ask the professional officers before I open up to members of the committee for their comments, if you don't mind, Councillor Smith. Legal?
If they were to hold those funds in lieu of demolition costs, that would reduce the risk, as they're not party to any other agreement. So holding that money would reduce the risk of the licence being terminated by the other side.
And the person who's holding the licence on behalf in behalf of the management committee, before the management committee takes it on, presumably there's some due diligence involved there as well, is there?
For them, yes, but it limits the risk if we hold the monies in lieu of the demolition.
Finance?
Agree with the risk mitigation arrangements and nothing to add to the numbers in the report, Chairman.
Valuation?
Yes, I concur with the comments of my colleagues, certainly. Yeah.
So I think the risk that we've identified, which is the management committee not being formed, you've already touched on that, Councillor Smith, but just open it up to members of the committee for any comments they might have. Councillor White?
Thank you, Chairman. So it's only brief comments, really. I mean, I think this is a good proposal. I think the risks are balanced by the rewards for the community. And this building, Councillor Smith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's very much in the heart of the community, isn't it? Next to the primary school, very much in the centre. The buildings are really quite aged, and they do need replacing. And I know the community would value their replacement and would continue to use them well, I expect. So I think for this sort of small bit of effort on our part and small shouldering of some risk in the short term, it's well worth it to make that all happen. So I'll be happy to support it.
Thank you. I'm going to bring you back in a second, Councillor Smith. Just could you give me a take on your view on the Parish Council's view on this proposal as well, and just for the benefit of the record? That's to you, Councillor Smith.
Chairman, I don't really want to comment on the Parish Council's thinking on how they've got to this point. It's been on a long and turgid road, and I think what we've arrived at today, the Parish Council accept that it is a publicly funded building and that they would continue to provide whatever support is required from public funds for the future. But I would add to that the Management Committee, since they took on the responsibility for this building, apart from paying council tax and insurance, all of the maintenance of what is, after all, an old Nissen hut, which is in quite smart condition at the moment, has been met entirely by the Management Committee. So what we're looking at in the continued short-term maintenance of the existing building is no problem to the committee. They have managed to do that very effectively. And it gives us a breathing space to be able, with the assistance of the county, to be able to locate the right people to give us advice on how we can go about raising funds to replace the building. So I'm confident, Chairman, that the Management Committee are fully capable of undertaking the maintenance and the ongoing service of the building, and will, as I've said, aggressively take forward the possibility of raising funds for a replacement. Sorry, does that answer the question?
It most certainly does. I've had experience of being on a management committee of a hall myself when the parish council, my parish council that I was in, the parish I was living in, didn't want to look after it anymore. It is eminently doable with the enthusiasm you find within your communities. Mr Turner, then back to Mr DeVille for comments and recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I should, because you've asked the question about the Parish Council's view, I should just point out that in the letter requesting the early surrender, the Parish Council did originally ask if the amount for demolition could be reduced. In terms of the risk mitigation that we've talked about, I did clarify that with them, that the County Council should hold that money because it has that liability potentially, and the Parish Council therefore sort of said, well, can the members, or it is the Parish Council's request that the County Council makes that money that they receive available for the Management Committee when they take over the long-term responsibility for the site.
Thank you, Mr Turner. Councillor DeVille.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr Smith, for the clarification. I think that was really useful, that A, the Management Committee are capable of doing this and have a track record of running this, and B, that they absolutely have the enthusiasm to take this forward as a sustainable community project. So thank you for that. The recommendations, therefore, Chairman, there are three. That the lease to Shenstone Parish Council be terminated early by agreement, subject to the County Council receiving £18,324 in lieu of the demolition of the buildings on the site. The Parish Council meet the County Council's legal costs in arranging the early termination. Secondly, Chairman, that the Assistant Director for Commercial and Assets be delegated approval to enter into a tenancy at will for the temporary occupation and management of the property for a maximum of 6 months. And thirdly, Chairman, that any future long-term arrangements be reported to committee in due course. They are the three recommendations that I move today, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. DeVille. I would just point out that tenancy at will generally has a maximum duration of 6 months, so the clock is ticking once this approval has been made. You've heard the recommendations. All those in favour? That is a unanimous approval for the record. Councillor Smith, wonderful to see you. Thank you very much indeed for coming.
Could I thank you, Chairman, for you and the committee? I think we've made good progress today, and I would invite you all, or at least I'll ask the Chairman to invite you all to the opening of our new building. Thank you, Chairman. Looking forward to it, Councillor Smith. Apparently they only serve champagne in Shenston, so I'm looking forward to that in particular. Right, moving on then to agenda item number 6, Tri-Veterans Support Centre, Hassel Street, Newcastle, ST51AR. Councillor DeVille.
Thank you, Mr. White. Colleagues, I'd wish this building to continue to be used as a centre for former veterans and also for local community use. The proposal, Chairman, is around the renewal of the tenancy at will for this facility. Fairly straightforward, colleagues. I'd ask Peter Townley, if he would, to give us further information on the recommendation. Peter, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor DeVille. Yes, this is a situation. The Tri-Veterans have been there for a considerable period of time. We have been engaging with them for a replacement agreement. They are quite happy to renew the tenancy at will. They have made an application for a grant to the Community Ownership Fund. Unfortunately, the results of that application are not yet known. Hopefully they will know by the end of this month. And if that is granted, then we can proceed to talking about sale to them of a building. So the tenancy of will is really to cover the interim period. Their current tenancy of will is already 2 years old, and as you mentioned a few minutes ago, Mr. Chairman, that is somewhat out of date. They are in agreement for renewal of tenancy at will, and I ask for permission to grant that, please.
Okay. So first of all, legal. Now, renewal of tenancy at wills, from my professional background, is something that is not necessarily desirable, but sometimes necessary under circumstances. But I'd be interested to hear your comments on that.
Yes, I mean, there's always a risk of an implied tenancy, but arguably, if you're renewing a tenancy at will, you could say that they've waived their previous rights. I believe my legal colleagues have provided advice internally already on this, and it's basically what the parties want to agree to in order to get this deal done. So there are risks involved with implied tenancies, but arguably, again, they may have waived their rights.
Thank you. Finance?
No comments, Chairman.
Valuation?
No, the only comment here is obviously we're looking at potentially selling the freehold to them, so that will come to the property subcommittee as a separate item.
Local member comments?
Thank you, Chair. No comments have been received.
Members of the committee, you've heard the report and the background to it. Do you have any comments before we move to the recommendation? Councillor DeVille?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The recommendation, there's one recommendation, Chairman. The tenancy at will to the Tri-Veteran Support Centre be renewed whilst the results of a grant application are known. Whilst the results of a grant application are known, and to allow time for a subsequent sale or letting to be agreed and finalised. One recommendation, Chairman.
All those in favour? For the record, that's unanimous. Moving on then to agenda item number 7, Community Hub Northfield Village Stone Road proposed grant of lease. Councillor DeVille?
Really delighted to bring this item today, Chairman. It's another example of us making the very, very best use of our assets. Northfield Village is an excellent facility providing massive lifestyle benefits in the area. This item today, Chairman, formalises the lease for the facility. Wendy was going to present further information around this proposal, Chairman. She can't be with us today, so I'd ask Ian to take us through this proposal, please, Ian.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is essentially just tidying up the formalities of the project that's nearly 10 years old, and is very successful. I think it's welcomed. We're using it as a model for other kinds of facilities in other places. As with projects of this nature, potentially sometimes they have a little bit of a stumbling block. The one about this was maintenance of the public realm, and we've reached an agreement that's satisfactory to ourselves and Wrekin Housing for them to look after it. So we're now in a position to enter into a lease just to regularise that, so we know exactly what the responsibilities are. From the County Council's point of view, we've got, well, both parties actually, there is a break with 3 months' notice after the first 5 years. So this isn't really a long-term decision, and it is just a bit of tidying up of formalities. Ideally would have been done at the time, but there's no significant implications for us. Thank you.
Legal.
Comment.
Finance.
Nothing to add, Chairman.
Valuation.
No, it's just a peppercorn rent, which is obviously why it's coming to the meeting. That's fine.
Local member.
Thank you, Chair. I've received comments from Councillor Jonathan Price, who fully supports the proposal.
Members of the committee, any questions? Councillor Parry.
Just on this question of landscaping obligations, is there also obligations on maintenance included in the terms of the lease? Are they required to, as normal, maintain it and then hand it back in the usual condition, if you like? How does that work?
Yeah, so this is just for the public realm element here, really, that we're talking about, and that is exactly the purpose of that, to establish the maintenance responsibilities. I'm sure you can imagine how the conversations have gone on since the thing was opened. This is your responsibility, no, that's yours. As I say, ideally it would have been clarified at the time of the development, but it was a relatively minor issue, and we've got a satisfactory resolution, and this just puts the necessary documentation around that. Thank you.
Paul, you look like you want to speak.
No, I was just, were you talking about the maintenance of the building itself rather than the public realm? Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Isn't very clear that we're only talking about grass. I thought we were talking about the lease. It doesn't refer to grass until you get down to that mention of how much it costs. Apologies, my mistake.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Back to you for recommendations, please, Councillor DeVille.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm really pleased that this is now formalised, and you're right, Ian, this really is a flagship facility. One recommendation, Chairman, the grant of a lease of the community hub to the Wrekin Housing Group Limited, the final details of the lease to be delegated to the Assistant Director for Commercial and Assets, Chairman.
All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Next item number 8, Burntwood Youth Centre and Community Office, Cherry Close, Burntwood, WS7 4RJ. Councillor DeVille.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. White. Premises were occupied and used by Support Staffordshire until April 2021. The facility that was then reassigned to Liberty Jamboree, who will remain in occupation until March 2022. Whilst a scheme is being developed to redevelop the site, and the proposal is to renew the lease. Peter Townley, would you wish to add any further information, please, Peter?
Thank you, Councillor DeVille. Yeah, this is really a stopgap measure to ensure the building is occupied, that the usual maintenance is carried out by a tenant rather than by ourselves. And it's now expected that the overall proposal will not be available until after next April. So the idea is to grant them possession until 2023 for those new proposals to be formulated. And this avoids the cost of an empty building in the interim. The idea is also to give them a bit more time for Liberty Jamboree to find alternative accommodation.
And the break in December, why is that felt necessary?
That is in case the proposals are formulated more quickly than expected.
Legal?
2 comments. The first one, will this be a reversionary lease situation where the current lease just continues to run and you'll have a fresh secondary lease that will commence for the final year? Or will you have a surrender and re-grant where you have a fresh lease for the whole term?
I think the intention is a surrender and re-grant.
Okay.
So the surrender and redraft incurs legal costs. So if you could just explain why the rationale that sits behind that for an organisation like this.
Sorry, Chairman, I think the previous lease terminates, and this one is to put a new lease in place at the termination of the existing lease.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Second question.
Will it be a mutual break or just a tenant break?
Mr. Chairman, it's intended that it be certainly be a landlord's break at the very least. A mutual break would be quite satisfactory to all parties.
Okay, good questions. So what works better? If you could just turn your microphone off, please. Thanks. What works better for the applicant? It doesn't look like it's been determined in this report, so we just need to make sure that we're approaching them with the right offer.
Yeah, so what's better for the applicant is a mutual break. What I would suggest is that we have had situations in the past where voluntary organisations like this can't continue, and actually the committee generally takes quite a pragmatic view of organisations that can't continue to occupy buildings. I mean, that is the point, by the way, why Liberty Jamboree are the current tenant, because Support Staffordshire didn't actually want to. So we will always look for ways where there is a community use and the building is, or the property itself isn't required for other uses in the future. We will always try to find a sustainable use rather than potentially holding private voluntary sector organisations to lease conditions. But I'd be perfectly happy with mutual breaks.
Okay, I think it's heading towards mutual break. Finance.
Just one question, Chair, under 6B. There's reference to significant maintenance. Have we got any sense of a maintenance backlog or what any particular liabilities could be with that? And then following from that, what are the arrangements to cover off that risk for the County Council?
That general point in relation to community buildings is something that we are going to be bringing to the committee at some point in the future. So it is something that we are working on because we understand the challenge of this. We're in a bit of an interim period for this because we have submitted a bid to One Public Estate for a health centre redevelopment on that site. And hence we are currently just looking at the medium term, so we don't have any medium term worries about it as far as this transaction is concerned. What we have recently instigated is that we are going to be doing our own surveys of these properties, so that hasn't been the past practice of the property team, but we are going to do that where they're the responsibility of voluntary sector organisations, and that is exactly to pick up your point, which is about understanding the risk to the council of these buildings and them not being maintained to the same level that we would do. Thank you.
So the nature of the lease determines their responsibilities towards maintaining it. One would assume that in these circumstances those leases are pretty light touch and won't carry those obligations. So potentially we've got quite a few implied liabilities on our books as a consequence of these leases. So that piece of work, looking forward to seeing that piece of work, because that'd be very useful to get us a good understanding of where we sit. Valuation.
Yeah, just on that point, Mr. Chairman, I think that most of the community organisations' leases are on a full repairing basis, so the tenant is in theory responsible for them. The only problem is, of course, that these tenants usually have very limited funds and can't afford to maintain the premises as we'd like. So, but on the point of this one, I have, it's a good use of making sure the property is occupied and used, and we don't have any costs or any significant major costs for the next year while we're formulating our own plans.
Local member.
Thank you, Chair. I have a comment from Councillor Mike Wilcox, who says I am happy with the proposal to renew the existing lease.
Members of the committee, Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm aware of the work of Liberty Jamboree through my wife, who teaches at a school that's almost a stone's throw from this site, and I think it's a very good thing if we can help them to buy the time to find new premises so they can continue with their good work, whilst also enabling the development of the health centre on the site, which is enormously important. Primary care is one of our strongest areas of focus, and we need to be doing our part to make sure that primary care providers are effective. So I think this is the right thing to do, and I'll be pleased to support it. I'm very keen to see that work regarding the intellectual underpinnings and the framework by which we make these sort of decisions. We try and help a lot of organisations through the best use of our property assets, but I think having some solid rules of the road that are up to date so that we can help those organisations to engage with us effectively is really important. So I'm pleased to know that's coming as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor DeVille.
Yeah, to add to Mr White's comments, Chairman, I think the discussions that we've had around this, fairly technical legal discussions and the questions that have been asked, I'm really happy, Chairman, that they really confirm our strategy of getting very best value from our assets and also at the same time providing real community benefits. And I think that the mechanics around this sort of confirm and support our overall objectives of doing that, Chairman.
Okay. Could you just give us recommendations, please, Councillor?
And indeed, Chairman, there's one recommendation that the Council renews the lease to Liberty Jamboree on similar terms to the existing lease. Any and all actions required to implement this decision be delegated to the Assistant Director for Commercial and Assets. Thank you, Chairman.
All those in favour? And for the record, that's unanimous. Thank you. Moving then to Land off Falkland Road, Lichfield, proposed transfer. Councillor DeVille, again.
Thank you, Chairman. Land off Falkland Road, Lichfield. Stafford County Council acquired this land for a previous phase of the Lichfield Southern Bypass, a highways project. This phase is now complete, and this particular piece of land does not need to be used for the highway, therefore is currently surplus to requirements. A transfer to Lichfield and Hatherton Canal Restoration Trust will facilitate continued restoration, again, for the benefit of the local community, Chairman. And I'd ask Ian to bring forward any further points that he feels necessary, Ian, please.
Thank you. I just remind the committee that this is similar transactions have happened in the past. It is an aim of the local plans for Lichfield to support provision of the restoration of the canal, and we have asked, and it is attached to the report, an update from the Trust in terms of their progress, and in there is sort of outline plans for how this section of the canal will look in the future. They seem to be making progress on something that's quite a monumental undertaking for a voluntary sector organisation, I would suggest. Paul will no doubt comment on the value in a moment, but essentially there is no other purpose for the County Council for this land. Thank you.
It is a monumental effort, with which I've been an observer for many, many years. Okay, legal.
Just to check a couple of points for the agreements. Will you be requiring a restrictive covenant for the use of the land in future? And will it be a right of preemption, so an offer to back to the County Council in perpetuity?
Yeah. The covenant, I think, seeing as they're converting it into a canal, is going to be perhaps unnecessary, but it's worth asking the question. But the preemption's a good question. Ian?
Yeah, sorry, perhaps we should have clarified that. That's what I believe we did last time, and that would be our intention. If they don't use it for a canal, then it comes back to us, or at least that's the option. Thank you.
Good questions. Finance?
I'm interested in the valuation point, Chair, and in hearing about that. I wonder if we could answer the question of whether the insurance and maintenance costs are likely to exceed the valuation. I'm assuming that they would, therefore this is a good idea, but I just would like clarity on that.
Seeing as you've been beautifully segued into it, valuation?
It's obviously a very narrow strip and on the side of a road, so it's not got an awful lot of value in many ways. But so yes, it's in the local plan specifically for the, so planning consent for anything else would be quite difficult to obtain. So it's a fairly limited value.
Okay, local member.
Thank you, Chair. I've received a comment from Colin Greatorex, who says, I am in favour of the transfer of this land off Falkland Road to Lichfield and Hatherton Canal Restoration Trust, and have been working with the Trust over the community benefit to walkers and cyclists. The Trust is planning pathways A to C, which will receive tree hedge planting and a pleasant towpath for visitors to be able to walk or cycle.
Okay, I suppose my reservation is around deliverability. And also the timescales that are required to convert our strip of land that we're handing over into something that resembles a canal. They were given consent to take a strip of Bowley Park, which is near me, and start to move it towards a part of the canal. When at Lichfield District Council we granted consent to do that, I suggested quite strongly that there was a 3-year time limit. That was rejected at the time. They converted that part of Bowley Park into what I would best describe as a moonscape with a load of sewer pipes, concrete sewer pipes on it, which is how it has remained for at least the last 10 years, 11 years since I moved near to there. So I would like to be sure that if we decide this afternoon that we're going to hand this over, that there is some certainty that the thing comes forward in good order. What we don't want is to have it converted into a building site that remains a building site for a very long period of time. It's not in their interest to do that. It's not in our interest as the people who are making the determination as to whether or not to hand it over. So I would like some sort of, I suppose, indication from the trust. I'm looking at Mr. Turner in this, that they have a plan to deliver it as part of a schedule of work, rather than just leaving it as a spoil. Are there any other questions from the committee? Councillor White.
It's just a very small thing, and it's sort of taking the sunny side of those very sensible comments about deliverability. When it is successfully delivered, I know we've discussed at this committee that the Staffordshire taxpayer should get some recognition for the donations it makes to these sort of projects. So can we make sure there's something written in to make sure that we get something on the site that recognises that contribution? Other than that, very happy to support it.
That's a very good point. Any other questions, comments? No? Could you give us a recommendation, please, Councillor DeVille?
Mr White, there's one recommendation. The transfer of the land off Falkland Road in Lichfield in 2 phases to Lichfield and Hatherton Canal Restoration Trust for nil consideration to facilitate the continued restoration of the canal and the Lichfield area.
Thank you, Councillor DeVille. All those in favour? For the record, that is unanimous. Right, moving on then to agenda item number 10, which is to move exclusion of the public. I move that the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in the paragraph of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 indicated below. I move.